Welcome to the Here I Am talk show with host Jamie Willis, where we discuss today's truths, people's stories, testimonies, healings, miracles, and so much more. Let's get started, honey. Hi, and welcome to the Here I Am show. I'm just so glad that you're all able to be able to listen to this show today. I have a special guest. His name is Dr. Chris Boles. And he has such an amazing story. I want to make sure that I'm not muted. I'm not muted. Am I, honey? Okay. All right. I am so sorry. Just wanted to make sure. Without my glasses on, sometimes I can't see the mute button. But anyway, he is such a special man. I go to him for chiropractic work. To be able to get my neck adjusted. And I had a little bit of back problems, but I've been going to him for, I would say, about 2 years now, but actually just a wonderful man of God. And I can't wait to have him on here. So I'm going to call him in right now. Dr. Boles, how are you?
Hi, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you. You were like the first person on my list to be able to have you on my show. And I'm so glad that we finally got to work it out, because I know that you're just extremely busy. So
for this kind of stuff, I'm so happy to be a part of it. It's wonderful to participate. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, you are so very welcome, because I really want people just to really know about your testimony. Mm-hmm. And we were talking, just before the show, that on my show, I love to have men and women, because we both hurt, and we still, need to be able to have, some type of biblical platform, and then also to be able to share the truth of the word.
Yeah.
And it, with this confusion so much in this world, it's hard to find a place to, to land and to be able to feel safe and be able to talk about, what is, really going on in people's lives and homes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So I would love for you to get started and talk about, I guess in the beginning of, because you are a chiropractor, and I think that with you being a chiropractor, that pretty much started your walk with the Lord.
It started before I went to chiropractic school. We had talked about that before we started the show, but I had gotten saved when I was 18. I'd finished my first year of college. I had grown up going to church, so I was familiar with God and Jesus and what he had done for me. But I think the difference, and I tell guys and ladies this now too, and even in my office, I think the difference was having a personal relationship with Jesus was the difference for me. I could be familiar with who he was, but actually having a relationship with him, that didn't happen until I went through my whole first year of college, and was very close after that. Like I was telling you, becoming a Christian to becoming a missionary instead of becoming a chiropractor, because I had wanted to become a chiropractor in high school. And so it was, thank God, I had some mentorship and advisors who said, I don't know if I'd rule that out. There is still room for Jesus, and there's still room for ministry in every workplace. And I'm so glad that someone told me that. And I love my job. And so I'm glad to be a chiropractor.
Yeah. And what I loved about so much, is just meeting you and getting chiropractic work, is that you're not ashamed to lay hands on me, and pray over me for the healing, and pray for the natural healing of the chiropractic work that you do, in through your hallways and even in the, in the rooms, that you place God in every single room. And also that you did not, during the past 3 years, during this crazy crisis that we went through, that you did not do the protocol.
Yeah, I felt like following God, that it was, and I'm sure there's people that would disagree with me, but I felt like there is a category of faith that is not new to following God. I mean, imagine what it was like before we had the type of medical technology we have now, and your child gets sick, right? And so
Mhm.
people were begging Jesus, come upstairs and please lay a hand on my child and pray for my child. The level of faith that requires, because there was no alternative, I think now places us in a position where we don't allow God to enter our healthcare until someone says, well, it's in God's hands now. And I've never liked that, because it's always been in God's hands. And so
Mhm.
you need to be put into a position where I have to choose protocol over faithfulness. I'm going to choose faithfulness because he's the doctor, he's the healer. And so I'm going to run to the Father first for healing, and then consider protocol or medical, or whatever you want to call it, as an afterthought. But yeah, I can't leave the source. The source is where healing comes from, and so we're going to trust him for it.
Yeah. And and it was amazing. And you even did that with your staff too.
Mm-hmm.
Your staff that you have are amazing men and women
Yeah.
that are there, and they're so humble, and they are not afraid to speak,
No.
to the goodness of our Lord. And then also, just a couple months ago, that you had praise and worship in your at your center, and we were able to pray over people, and also, being able to see some of the healing that
Mm.
you know, and
It's
it was absolutely incredible.
I don't know if you know this, but we had a man who was seriously considering taking his life. And after that night, he said, I can hang in there. And if it wasn't for this night of worship and prayer and intervention, I may not be around. And so, even if it was for him,
Yeah,
it would have been worth doing. Right. So, there was answered prayer. I was so
yeah.
glad to see that.
And and Chris, it was I was waiting and sitting there, and after we were doing praise and worship, and I'm like, okay, Lord, what do you have me here for? I know that you had me here for a reason.
Mm.
Um, but then all the rooms, were full, and there was other people praying over, and so I was sitting there, and and then your staff came up to me and says, "There's this gentleman who needs prayer, and you're the one that needs to pray over him
Mm.
and anybody who's in here." And I'm like, Okay." I said, "Well, where is he?" So they put me in this little tiny room. It was just right behind the desk in the front. And this precious gentleman comes and walks in with tears in his eyes. And he's like, You're right." He's like, I don't think I'm fit to be on this earth anymore. He goes, "I'm tired.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm tired of the pain. I'm tired of the heartache."
Mm.
And to be able to lay hands on him, and what we did, the couple people on the staff too, laid hands on him, and that man was a completely different person.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that he's doing well,
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
and but I just give God all the glory and all the praise for that, because there's power in prayer.
Uh, Part of the thing that I encourage my patients with, and then men that I get a chance to lead to, is I say, there is a lot of inner voice and whisper inside that says to throw in the towel and says to
Hmm.
quit. I don't know if it's probably just as strong for ladies, and it might be a different voice, but as far as speaking for myself, I would say it says you should quit. And are you making a difference? Is what you're doing worth it? And as I've followed God over the years, it's become obvious that that's just the devil. And he wants to convince all of us that us being here isn't worth it. But the truth is, there is only one of us. There's only one me. There's only one you. There's only one of that man. And if we fall for it, right? The deception and the lie, and leave this earth, there's one less person making a difference that God determined was important enough to even create in the first place, and is here. And so I always tell people, in fact, I think you guys heard me say this for that ministry night. I said, I don't permit the lies to be louder than the reassuring voice of the Father, because at first they are always louder. One of the guys that my wife and I talked to, he's a gifted counselor and very spirit led. He goes, Satan's like this dog that just barks really loud, but he has no teeth. You know, he's just barking, barking. And it could be easy to go, oh my gosh, I'm scared of this dog. And then when you start to recognize, but it's a dog with no teeth, some of the terror and like the fear starts to kind of melt away a little bit. And I think that's an example of what God slowly does. So that voice starts to become less and less loud. And then the reassuring voice of a loving Father starts to become louder and louder and louder, because you start to recognize that's the voice worth listening to, right?
Yeah. And it's so true. And it's, in the quiet moments, it's a whispering voice, but in times, his voice is a little bit louder. And when he, wants me to write something down, that's when his voice gets a little bit louder.
Yeah. And it sounds convincing. Oh my gosh, it does.
It does. It does. It's a calming voice, but then, it's also a voice that that you're hearing him. So I would love for you to talk about your story and the start of it. You were married before, correct?
Yeah. So I got married in 2010. I was still in chiropractic school. I have two wonderful children from my first marriage, my son and my daughter. And it's hard to believe, but my son's getting ready to turn 13 next month. My daughter's getting ready to turn 10. So they're 12 and 9. And so it was a hectic time. We started my practice from scratch. I didn't buy it from anyone. I always felt like this was the call to start an Exodus Chiropractic in Nashville. We're in Franklin, Tennessee, which is just south of Nashville. But I felt the call to start my own practice. And if anyone listening has ever been an entrepreneur or started a business from nothing, it is a lot of work. And getting my name out, getting people to trust me, building a reputation, marketing, telling people who I was in those early years from 2011 when we started my practice. For the first 3 years, I felt like I was working 80 to 90 hour weeks, which is just customary when you're starting something new, unfortunately. And so if you would ask me, I would have said I was happily married. I had two wonderful kids. And in 2016, it just all came crashing down because my wife at that time confessed to me that she had had an affair. And it shocked me. When I write about it now, I go, the movie Matrix, where they're convincing Keanu Reeves that he lives in a video game, and he can't even comprehend the reality you're telling him is real. And unfortunately, he eventually has to accept it. That's how I felt. I felt like the news I had learned, number one, is betrayal. There's no way around it. It's just betrayal. But the news I had learned was such a shock to me. I couldn't comprehend what I was hearing. And so a dream of mine, and a dream for most people, which is to get married, stay married, be married to one person, right, for the rest of their lives, I had to say bye to. That was a very sad time in my life. I did my best to cover that up, wear a mask, enter the practice, do the doctor thing, and pretend like everything was okay for me personally, but it was not. I tell guys now that ask me about that, I was depressed, tortured, suicidal. I didn't want to live. I had never felt like that in my entire life. I had always kind of lived a Ferris Bueller life. Everything had really always worked out for me. I felt like things that I had committed to achieve and work toward and strive for, they seemed to work out for me. And that was the first time that, without my consent, someone derailed all the plans. And it was very difficult for 3 years, I would say, from 2016 to 2019, when I finally got divorced, unfortunately. I kind of didn't know how to live. I would sit in church, I remember that, and just look at everybody in disgust and go, everyone here is a liar, and everyone here is uh, betraying each other, and everyone, it was so cynical, right? And so there was a temptation when I was at my worst to start to see the world as that. And what I tell folks now is I say, don't fall for that, because that's the trap of cynicism, and that's the trap of victimhood. And you don't want to buy a house on that street, because your perception of reality isn't encouraging, it's not inspiring, it's not a fruit of the spirit, that's for sure, and it keeps you trapped. And but I won't deny that that was probably the hardest times of my life and saddest times of my life, and very difficult because I had 2 kids too. And we ended up getting divorced in 2019. I am remarried to a beautiful woman who is pregnant with our first daughter. We're due in December. And so I'm here to tell you, my prayer is that it works. But if it doesn't, it's not a surprise to God. He still has a plan. And that time in my life was just a chapter in my story. At the time, I was convinced it was the whole book. But he helped me, by the grace of God, hang in there, be encouraged, and just make it one day at a time, because tomorrow looked even brighter than I could have ever imagined. So thank God for that.
You know, in the beginning, when you first found out that she cheated on you, um, what was the first thing? Did you have to leave the home?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I couldn't stand to look at her. I was so angry at what she had done that I was borderline hate inside my heart, because it's voluntary destruction of a marriage, right? It's not an accident. It's putting yourself into a position to sabotage a covenant. And
Mhm.
I couldn't stand to look at her. So I decided to go stay in hotels quite a bit. Um, Actually, there's still some hotels here in Franklin that I look at and I go, man, I remember staying there, and it doesn't hurt looking at it. It's just kind of a reminder of what God delivered me of. But yeah, I stayed in some hotels. She stayed with some friends occasionally. It was difficult, that's for sure.
And what about your children? How old were they at that time?
My daughter, she was 5 at the time. No, 3 at the time, and then my son was 6 at the time. So they were very little. They couldn't understand what was going on. I think the more obvious internal and like in the home dynamics was, where's dad? He's not here as much. Where's mom? She's not here as much. That was more of the obvious change.
And I remember when I was going through, you know, the difficult time of losing my first husband. And I feel like going through a divorce and a death is pretty much a lot in the same,
Mm,
because part of your testimony, you know, is my story, but you know, my husband passed away.
yeah.
Um, what was the point that you were able to, because you have to surrender. You have to surrender everything to Christ when it comes to a tragedy like this,
Yeah.
in order to humble yourself, because the pain is excruciating,
Mm,
and the shaking, the anxiety,
yeah.
that you feel like you're in, you know, you're not in control at all, and you're not
Mm.
at that time. So what was able to help you? Did you was it the church, or was it a friend?
Well, me being a guy, obviously, when I talked about this at that worship night, I said, "Hey, for my guys here, when something's broke, what do you do?" And then everybody says, "Fix it." Right?
Mhm.
I tried everything to repair and fix the marriage. Unfortunately, a marriage is not a part that can be um, exchanged and repaired in a shop. It's so much more complex than, oh, it just needs a spark plug. That's why it won't start. Like that's not how it works. So I tried books. I tried 12-week programs. I tried counselors, and all this is like me trying to get her to do it together. And sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. One of the hardest parts about infidelity and betrayal is you have to face the fact. Oh, sorry. You have to face the fact that you are not in control.
Mhm.
That is a very difficult fact to reconcile, especially if you're like me and everything goes your way until it doesn't. And you don't get to make a decision for someone else. They are making their own decisions. So I was trying everything to repair a damaged marriage, and it just continued to get worse and worse. And she would cheat again and again. And it would just be a constant reminder that, Chris, you can do nothing. None of the things that you would do and are standard to most everybody are going to work here. In fact, I even wrote about this in my book that I'm writing. I said, I would laugh if I ever heard about people who are having marriage trouble, because I would say, well, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? Until I had marriage problems and none of that stuff worked. Because the reality of two people making their own decisions is the reality of our relationship with God and our ability to choose Him or to not choose Him.
Yeah.
Right. And that was very difficult. So we did the counselor thing, the book thing, the 12-week program thing. I talked to friends, mentors, counselors. I had wonderful relationships in my life, people who I could count on, but it didn't repair or fix, in my opinion, the marriage that I hoped it would. So that was a difficult part, having to let go of something that I wanted so bad to work out.
Yeah, and with my, I got married, a year after my husband passed away, because I felt like I needed to have, you know, a man in my life. And I thought, I'm happily married. I'm happily married. But Jimmy and I, really had to go through some difficult um, situations, because, it was a blended family.
Mm,
And then also, that I wasn't done healing of the grief, and to know that I
mm,
was still loved by the Lord,
mm-hmm.
and that He wanted me to come to Him, and not by other sources. And we went to marriage counseling, and the marriage counseling um, said, it was Christian, said that you guys are done.
Mm,
You guys have to just give it up. And it wasn't until we both realized that this marriage is what we wanted, but we both had to want it.
yeah.
We both wanted to have God first. But if there's a partner that doesn't um, want what you want, and what God is showing you, it's very difficult for it to work.
It's impossible.
But it's impossible. It's
Yeah.
impossible, because they have free will just as much as we do, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And if it's not for what they want, even though it is a covenant,
Hmm.
And when that covenant is broken, it's extremely hard to mend.
You know what it reminded me of, though? I became a more compassionate individual
Mm-hmm.
because of what I experienced. And so, anyone who is experiencing marriage difficulty or betrayal or loss, um, and I tell them I experience more compassion from the failure and the destructiveness of what happened, and that I would say it's a good thing. It's because it made me realize God gave us free will, and I had to reconcile someone not choosing me, and God has to reconcile that with every single person that can either choose Him or not choose Him, and yet still love us, still allow us to come to Him, even after we say no over and over and over and over again. He still says that you're still worth it
Mm-hmm.
to a daughter. He still says you're still worth it to a son. And phew, man, I had to watch that happen in front of my eyes where someone said, I don't want you. Right. And here's my behavior suggests I don't want you. And God watches that with us for our entire lives. Right. And still says that you're still worth it. You're still loved. You're still wanted. And He has these arms that are wide open, these hands that are wide open, and He's still accepting the heart of the child. Right. It's just remarkable.
Yes. And the healing only comes through Him.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like you, I was reading books and, trying to fix it. And, um, because I thought, this is what God wanted. He set, this, amazing man in my life. And I thought that he was going to be my everything. And it was in the beginning. And he was amazing. But then I began to smother
Yeah.
and depend on him more than I was depending on God. And so finally, we were just, but it was through the grace of God that healed both of us.
Mm,
We both needed to be healed
yeah.
and be recommitted to this marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And the devil doesn't want marriage.
No.
That's one thing that's first thing he wants to do. He destroys marriage, and then he wants to get to our children. And
I was talking to a friend of mine about that, actually, about the role of husbands in the defense of the relationship, right? So if God made men to be defenders and protectors and providers, I was talking to another friend of mine who his wife unfortunately had cheated and multiple times, and they ended up getting divorced. Unfortunately, he said, I felt like the knight protecting the front of the castle and defending it constantly, and she was in the back asleep, allowing the back door to be open. And he said it was so frustrating to me trying to intercept attacks and trying to defend our relationship when Satan found a way in anyways.
yeah,
He does that, right? He hates marriage. He hates the love that two people can have for each other. That is a reflection of Christ's sacrifice for us, and that's what marriage is designed to be. It's just unfortunately they don't always work out.
yeah. And what the Lord has revealed to me, just a couple of weeks ago, that is still a covenant, even if you're not married. It's still a covenant to the Lord, because He doesn't want us to, infidelity. He doesn't want us to have lust. That's nothing but from the devil. But
Mm-hmm.
He wants us to be for Him and for Him alone, and He's our everything.
Yeah.
He's our needs, our wants, and our praises, and our glory, and the person that we can just tell our intimate thoughts to, and be able to speak to Him, even as our Father, but also as a friend. And I'm not downing any kind of Christian counseling or anything like that, because some of it works, and it works really well. But unless the two partners, the husband and wife, aren't on the same conviction and guidance of the Lord, it's very, very difficult.
When I was doing the healing programs, the first one was one that you were designed to do with your partner. And then the second one, after we completed that, and I was just so disappointed in how the first one turned out, in the sense that I thought this would help. But I started to notice a pattern, not just in my own marriage, but on the call. So like we'd have calls, and there would be 6 other couples on these calls. And you started to recognize the repentance from unfaithfulness, and then the avoidance as a contrast to partners that were just like, this isn't a big deal, I'm justified. But I think what's ugly about that is God doesn't want just your behavior to change. He wants your repentance, right? Where you go, gosh, I messed up, I'm sorry, please forgive me. Not, you caught me, so I'm going to fix it. That's different. And it's like when I catch my son sneaking candy or something like that in our kitchen, the only reason he's sorry is because he got caught.
Yeah.
The only reason that dude is sorry is because he got caught. If he didn't get caught, he wouldn't be sorry. Repentant says, I'm sorry even if I didn't get caught. I feel bad inside. I'm ready to change my behavior. And so it became apparent on those calls who was ready to do that and who was not. And so I guess what I'm saying is we completed that thing, and I just never I never felt like she wanted to change. It was just like, let's just move it along here. But there were other couples that did. And so I admired that. So then the next program I did was irrelevant to her, and more about, look, if you're coming, great. If you're not, though, I need healing. Like I have to do something, because if I stay in this marriage, if it doesn't work out, I still have to be a family man. I still have to be a dad. I still have to be a businessman. I still have all of these responsibilities to the world and to the kingdom. And I'm not okay with being a broken version of myself, showing up and doing some worthless version of myself role. I want to be healed. And so I did this program, and I learned that more than half of marriages were failing. Just as much female caused infidelity was happening. I learned all sorts of statistics about marriage, unfortunately, that, man, there's an all-out invasion from the devil on the covenant and on the marriage, because he hates it.
Yeah, he does. And as I said, and then it trickles down, and then it attacks our children.
Mm-hmm.
How did your children take to this?
That was sad, and that was probably one of the, telling my kids that their parents weren't going to be married anymore was hopefully the saddest thing I've ever had to do in my life. And my son he used to draw. So he would draw pictures of himself crying, which was just heartbreaking. He would write little messages to God that would say, why divorce, God? But because of how little my daughter was, she would just go, well, why? And not really quite get what was going on, just because of how young she was. Now that they're older, they've had people to talk to. They have friends whose parents have unfortunately divorced. So it's not as lonely as you might think, but that was tough. My son was angry. He was a bit stoic. didn't want to talk much for a while there, for probably almost 2 years, I would say. My daughter, she was just kind of trucking along. I don't know if I really recognized much of the change in her because of how little she was, I would say.
Hmm.
I'm still kind of observing that.
Yeah, and with my children, um, one of them was 19, and the other one just turned 12.
Mm,
Right before he passed away. It was like our last family vacation together, and it took her till this year, and it's been 11 years for her to finally been able to heal from it because she kept everything bottled up.
really?
Yes. And so we had a phone call just a couple of weeks ago. We were on the phone for 3 hours, and that was very unusual, you know, for her
Mm,
to talk for 3 hours. Usually I only get 5 minutes with her.
yeah.
And
Well, thank God for that.
yeah. So
Mm,
then to be able to see the God working in her, she still has a little ways to go.
yeah.
Um, but it was just like the Lord just, opened up the floodgates for her to finally, you know, and it was a learning experience for her too, because, she was so young, and in what she thought, what was going on, it really wasn't, what the truth was. Um, with him being, sick for a while,
Mm,
and, and the decisions that I made, after he passed, but, I was still, grieving and going through a lot of pain. So, I wound up making some mistakes.
yeah.
Um, just because I didn't know. I tried to fix it, and then also it was just part of my journey,
Mm,
to get to where I am now.
yeah.
But I know that you are a completely different man. I
Mhm.
didn't meet you before, but I know that when the transformation happens and you finally have healing within yourself, and that what you said is so true. I had to have healing, you had to have healing for yourself in
Mm,
order. Okay, is this marriage going to work? And I'm okay with that. I'll stick with it. But what's going to happen if I can't?
mm,
Am I going to be all right?
mhm.
Am I able, to be able to still function and to be able to live with you or without you?
Yeah.
But you don't want somebody in your life is not that's not committed.
Mhm.
And
I tell, so my parents have been married for 35 years, and I got great parents. Um, but I told my mom recently, she said, um, or maybe I told her, but either way, we're talking about a previous marriage. I said, um, I would have just stayed married, mom. And she said, you get that from your dad. Like he is willing to do his duty. And so even though I was um, betrayed and mistreated, the marriage isn't just about me. It's a reflection of a covenant, and I take covenants serious, and everybody should.
mhm,
So even though there was um, betrayal on my ex-wife's part, I was still acceptable of the marriage, and so I wasn't going to go return the favor and you know seek all these unhealthy moral failure behaviors to make her pay or maybe somehow medicate myself. That wasn't acceptable to me either. But I had to hear from God. I had to hear from God. In fact, when guys ask me, how do you know whether to stay or go? I cannot answer that question. I say that is a question that you'll have to answer for yourself, and I hope that you'll ask God. I hope that you'll ask God and wait for the answer. And one finally came for me, but it took almost 3 years for me to even know what to do. And I'll tell you this, that was one of the hardest parts of following God, is when you feel like he's not listening and you feel very alone and you feel very dark, and you're left to deal with your emotions and made up thoughts. And in that particular scenario with infidelity, they call them intrusive thoughts, the just nastiness of what someone did and you having to deal with that. But I had to deal with silence from God for over 2 years. But I was willing to at least wait for an answer. And I felt very alone. And I write about this in my book because I don't think that my experience is unique. In fact, I think anyone that deals with something today, you can find a solution or you can find an answer in the Bible. God has something to say about it. And I found a Bible verse in Job where he's getting just torn up, right? A lot of us know the story of Job, where his kids are dead, his servants are dead, his business is gone, and his body is tortured and in sores. And he says, I pulled this up. He says, but if I go to the east, he is not there. He's talking about God. And if I go to the west, I do not find him. When he is at work in the north, I do not see him. When he turns to the south, I catch no glimpse of him. I needed to know this is not the first time. I'm not alone. And God, you have a word about this, about sometimes it's just going to be quiet. And sometimes there's a lonely season, but that doesn't mean he's not there. It just means it's a little quieter.
Yeah. And a lot of times he wants us to be in the quiet because he's working on things, and he doesn't want us in the mix of it. He doesn't want us in the mix of the torment. And what he's doing is he's taking us away. He's putting us in a quiet spot. And that's the hardest thing to do, is to be still.
Yeah.
It's really hard to be still because, you're like me. I'm a fixer too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I, needed to fix everything, with my first marriage before, my husband died, and then, getting remarried and fixing that. And so finally he's just like, can you just be still and let me work?
Yeah. Yeah. The word I got was just park the car.
Yeah. Just park the car,
You just have to park the car for a little while. And I'm like, but how long, God?
Yeah, I know. And the
like,
waiting,
that's all I got. There was no answer to that. It's just park the car. That's it.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's hard.
It is extremely hard. So I know you just said that you're going to have another baby in December. And I think the first time hearing it.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, man. So we're pregnant. She's due in December. And guess what we named her? We're naming her Grace, the unmerited favor from God. And we were telling my kids about this, and Eli, my son, he goes, oh, that's like second chances. And my wife and I looked at each other and we were like, that's exactly what that is.
Absolutely. And you're having a girl?
Yep.
Oh, okay. You guys having a baby shower at the...
Oh, I'm sure she's got all the baby showers.
Yeah.
She goes, you have to take a picture at the baby shower. And I was like, well, how many baby showers do I need to take pictures at?
Mm-hmm. So, well, tell me a little bit about your wife and how did you meet her?
I call her my angel. She was a friend to me. She had come to my office years ago, and so we met at a marketing event that I was at, a bridal show, ironically. And so her and her friend were there for her friend's wedding. She was in the wedding, and so that's how we met at this marketing event at the bridal show. Well, we got to know each other just talking on the phone and messaging back and forth with text messages. And her family experienced a similar circumstance with infidelity, and so she could relate what I was experiencing and going through, because she had saw that happen to her own dad, and so it was unique, and God placed her in my life to be someone who could be an encourager, who could be someone who listened. And men, especially when you're an achieving oriented person, you need people in your life who don't want something from you. They just want to be in your life. Because the majority of my relationships, there's some transaction that's occurring. And so it was really nice to just feel a friend, feel the presence of a friend, someone that just wanted to listen, see how my day was going, listen to me if I was sad and depressed, and I hadn't had that in a really long time. That felt really good.
So how long did you date before you?
We dated for a couple years. I wanted to take it slow. I wasn't ready to sign up for marriage again, understandably, from what happened last time. There was a lot of healing that needed to happen inside of me for me to trust again, and for me to kind of like have open hands and not like this in the marriage relationship. And so between her being patient and talking to a wonderful counselor that we talked to together, and God and time, I was able to be healed inside and start to consider, you know what, marriage is a good thing. It's just that a bad thing happened.
Yeah.
And those are exclusive. They're not the same thing. And so
Yeah,
I was able to say yes again. In fact, you'll like this. I had a folded up piece of paper, and on it was all the prayers that I had wrote down for my ex-wife over the years of our marriage. We were married for about 10 years, and it was worn down. It was folded in my Bible for so long. I pull it out, pray over it, put it back in there. And it was things like protect her heart, draw her to you, keep her safe, show her how to be a good mom. Just anything that a husband would pray for a wife. And after God was silent for such a long time, I couldn't look at that anymore. For me, it was a reminder that those things were unanswered. And so I threw it away. I was so angry. I threw that thing away that I had been praying for years and years and years and years and years. And one day God said, that wasn't for her, that was for her. And I go, gosh, I wish I wouldn't have thrown that away. I wish I would have thrown that away, because those prayers were answered. It just wasn't in the way that I thought they were going to be answered. And how many times has someone said that about following God, right? Where they were like,
right.
He did answer the prayers, but it was just different than I thought it was going to be.
And do you think that your ex-wife got any of the healing for her too?
I hope.
Yeah.
I hope so. She's remarried. She's had a child with her new husband, and they're pregnant again. I do pray. I pray quite a bit for her, actually, because selfishly, she's still the mother to my kids, right? Yeah. So I still want her to be a good mom. And I want her to be released from any shame or guilt or frustration, or, you know, whatever it is that she felt from the previous marriage. It's just that, you know, I get to be married to someone different now who I just love.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. She is so adorable.
Yeah.
And she is, you know, truly a woman of God, and just absolutely adores you. And I'm sure, you know, I haven't seen her with your kids, but I'm sure that they're, you know, just in awe of her.
She's a wonderful lady. She's a natural.
Yeah, she does. She shows so much grace and mercy, and humble.
Yeah.
Very, very humble. And
favorite thing about
very supportive of you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Extremely supportive.
When you have context or like a previous experience, you can't help but um, compare the two, right? Like, even if you don't want to, you still will. And before this call, she goes, "Hey, let me pray for you real quick." And I was just like, "Gosh, you're just amazing. I don't have to ask, I don't have to invite, I don't have to propose. She just does it." And it's just one of those things that God just knew I needed. It's just getting there um, was it was a little bit darker than I thought it would be, but it was worth it. It was worth
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And I appreciate your honesty. Not in here, men, really need to hear this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because a lot of it, in the past couple years, well, it's been a while that men's voices have been, you know, shut down.
Real
That
quiet.
this is not allowing the men to be men
Yep.
and degrading them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like we don't have something to say, and we do.
Yes.
But when you give the platform to someone else, and then you get upset because men are quiet, I think you create a standard, unfortunately, from that. And men, in fact, God has raised up relationships now with guys I know that have experienced similar failings that I experience, and I know that part of my ministry, it's not just the health and well-being of my patients, but also the heart of men and the heart of women too, but mainly the men that have experienced what I've experienced. And it's an honor getting to be there for them, listen to them, and encourage them to fight and to trust God and to submit and to surrender and wait for Him to deliver them, because He will.
Yeah, and he will. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just so extremely important what you're doing.
Yeah.
And, as I said, men's voices have been silent for a really long time.
Yeah.
And that's why, with my platform, that I can't exclude, men. I can't just have women on here. It's the men and women because we're all, you know, um, in a covenant with the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
We're both there for his kingdom and for his glory and
Yeah.
for his mercy. And we're equal.
Mm-hmm.
He created us equal. And I just want to be able just to help as many people as I can
Yeah.
to get his voice out there, to use me. Um, I'm not in it for the money
Mm-hmm.
at all. It's cost me everything to do this show. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
getting any money
Yeah.
from anybody. I have great sponsors, to be able to air it. Um, but I'm just getting so much great feedback, and with people like you who are, this isn't an easy thing to do, is to get on camera and to pour your heart and soul and talk about things of what you went through,
Mm-hmm.
because it's hard,
Mm-hmm.
but I love it how, through this and through the trials, that the Lord gives us the boldness
Yeah.
and the urgency to speak truth.
Yeah. You never know who's listening.
No,
Whether I'm leading the girls who are just wonderful in the
they
office,
are.
and telling them about, hey, what does the heart have to do with serving people? Or it's a patient in another room while I'm taking care of someone, and they're listening to me talk about something difficult. It impacts them, and the heart just needs to be loved. It needs to be protected, and it needs to have a relationship with Jesus. It just has to.
It does. There's no other way.
Mm-hmm.
There's no other way. And people keep on searching for other things,
Yeah.
but it's right there.
Yeah.
So, but thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate everything. I appreciate you helping me with my healing too.
Yeah,
Thank you for your voice and thank you for your obedience of what you're doing. And
absolutely.
then I want you back.
It's
I
been
want
an
you back.
honor. Thanks so much. Maybe we could do a part two and
Yeah,
hear
be able
more.
to do a part two, and and then be able to help other men um,
Hmm.
and women who are on here that are going through the same thing of what you went through.
Yeah, I got a lot of encouragement to share, and
Yes.
it's just because of God, that's for sure. So,
Yeah. And then hopefully I'm praying that the Holy Spirit gets you to finish up the end of your book,
yep,
um, and be able to share, your love and grace that He's shown you. But
yes.
thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Jamie.
Okay. All right. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye bye. Just an amazing man, um, in the healing business, but also healing, not so much, with your spine and chiropractic work, but he's also in, using his healing experience of things that he's went through with marriage and adultery um, and to be able to survive after that, because it is a tremendous amount of hurt after somebody has done the things, and to be able to ask for forgiveness. So we'll see you tomorrow, and I hope that you enjoyed the show today. Bye bye. Thank you for watching the Here I Am show. For prayer requests, questions, or show information, email me at hereiamshow@gmail.com.